Joining me right now to discuss all of this, former Congressman J.D. Hayworth, former Congressman Alan West. Gentlemen, it's great to have you back with us. Now, we look at Putin. He's sending kind of mixed messages. Just recently, he said that he called this an unconstitutional coup. Is Putin really backing down, or is he doubling down?
You know, it's interesting, John. When we were leaving the air yesterday here on America's Forum, you had a report coming from the Ukraine that Putin had delivered an ultimatum, and suddenly subsequent language saying, no, that was not true. Then the press conference overnight for us during the daylight hours in the Russian Federation, where President Putin cited the so-called unconstitutionality of the coup that took place, as he described it, in the Ukraine. So, Alan, what is actually going on here? We're in the information age. Is this simply disinformation? What's the bottom line on Putin and his plans for the Ukraine?
Well, the bottom line, the most important thing is we cannot try to portray Putin in a light that we want to understand. We have to see him for who he is, and we have to understand really what is his long-term strategic goal. And if you understand his long-term strategic goal, don't pay attention to the little things, the information that he's putting out there. Understand the moves that he's making. Crimea is just the beginning, because Russia without the Ukraine is just a small little country, but Russia with the Ukraine is truly going back to what Putin wants to restore. You know, he said that the most disappointing thing for him in the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. This, without a doubt, is not going to be the end. It's going to be an expansion.
So we think about the Ukraine, the breadbasket of what used to be the old Soviet Union, and not only economic and agricultural issues there, but the whole notion of our economic retaliation, if you will, in terms of sanctions. We just heard from President Obama. Is this too little too late? Is it a rational and reasonable first step? Your take on the whole notion now of economic sanctions imposed by the United States?
Well, first of all, you have to understand, are you going to go into this economic sanctions by yourself, or are you going to have a coalition? I don't know if Europe is going to be, really ready to do something like this because of all those natural gas pipelines and the energy that they draw from Russia, and definitely the pipelines that come out of Ukraine. So I think right now what can immediately be done to send a message to Vladimir Putin to maybe stop him from strategically going any further. Let's start looking at expanding NATO to some of these other countries, especially the Baltic countries, which are really going to be concerned. I mean, we can start looking at some military-to-military exercises. We can bring in small units into Poland, some other countries, to show that we are looking at a, power projection, a forward presence that is there. And maybe even, John Kerry can talk to the leadership, the interim government there in Ukraine, and say, would you like to have some small special forces type of units to work with your soldiers with training, things of that nature? You've got to show some type of seriousness and not just this thing about economic sanctions.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned sending, in essence, instructors into the Ukraine. Now, a lot of people in this world would look at that as a type of provocation. I don't expect John Kerry to offer that in his portfolio. Is one of the problems of this administration a lack of assertiveness when it comes to legitimate American interests?
Well, it's a huge lack of assertiveness. And really, when you go back to look at what the Special Forces mission is, it's called FID, Foreign Internal Defense. I mean, that's a viable training mission that they have. So this is not being provocative. This is something where we say, hey, we're looking at having this type of security agreement. So I think right now, when you hear a president that continues to talk about we're examining, we're looking, we're assessing, we're analyzing, if Congress really wants to do something, Congress can do this. You're the commander-in-chief. You're the president of the United States of America. You're the one that we're looking to take action. And then another thing that a lot of people are not talking about is that the Field Marshal al-Sisi from Egypt recently was in Moscow and met with Putin to talk about a security agreement. So if we really think we're going to be isolating Russia, he's already played this thing out to the second and third order.
And it's more than just reaching out to the Egyptians and more than reaching out to the Iranians. In the old days, we talked about Sino-Soviet problems, the border clashes in the late 1960s, but suddenly there seems to be a rapprochement between Russia and China. What is the gambit there?
It's very simple. In the Middle East, they have a simple maxim: the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So now if Russia and China can come together against the United States of America at a point where we are extremely weak, they're going to come together. And what you now need to think about is, will China expand into the South China Sea? We already know what they've done with the Senkaku Islands. Are they going to be even more so emboldened?
One note in closing, Alan. Newsmax.com cited a Wall Street Journal article where a colonel from the Russian army reached out to a colonel in the Ukrainian army, I guess with Russian troops surrounding a Ukrainian base, saying, look, why don't you guys come along with us? We have jobs for you. A kind of new approach to psychological operations there, or since you're a colonel, what is your takeaway from that?
Well, you're right. This is psychological operations. It's the whole, be a part of what we're doing, be a part of the resurgence of Mother Russia, our great empire, and we can come back together and have pride, and you can have greater opportunities, and maybe even greater opportunities to command and control larger units. So this whole thing, we saw it happen back with Adolf Hitler with the Sudetenland. We're going to go in and protect ethnic Germans. The same thing happened with Putin in 2008. We're going to go in and protect ethnic Russians in Georgia. This is part of that strategic design, and this has been a well laid out plan. So military to military, those are the type of things you're going to see happening.
Gentlemen, interesting take, especially when you look at the historical references here. You got to take a close look at those and then try to figure out what that all means with the new modern realities in the region. We want to hear from everybody at home. What do they think about the current situation? Do you think Putin is trying to up the ante here, or is he maybe taking a step back? Right in. We want you to participate in our social media discussion. Find us here in the program, John B_Newsmax, or any of us here at the program at Newsmax TV. We'll be right back with more, taking a closer look at Ukraine and specifically Vladimir Putin's comments right after this.